Okay, we ready to start?
Indeed.
Start. I'm going to mute for a second. Are we all ready to start?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to the April 6th edition of the FOSS, NatickFOSS user group. I think we all know each other here. I don't see any newcomers. I see a fellow Jitzer, but I'm not sure who that is. And I think the first thing on here is on FOSS News, and that is to Ubuntu 2304 is only going to install .deb and snap packaging. And Ubuntu flavors have agreed to stop using Flatpak. That sounds like more of a political move to me. But Snap is a canonical thing that they came out with a few years ago, and everybody's been imitating it in different ways, AppImage and Flatpak.
Jerry,
Yep.
why don't I handle that first batch quickly?
Okay.
Dick Miller here. Jerry is our new moderator, and I'm happy to turn it over to him. But some of the items in here I put together as sets, and that was one set. What's going on here is Ubuntu, Canonical, who produces Ubuntu, has decided it does not want to give beginners downloading its system confusing alternatives to get lost between. So Canonical has removed a bunch of package installers that I think are very nice. And it's affected a lot of other programs because they went on and got all the Ubuntu flavors, including, for instance, the Ubuntu Unity that I use and many others. They got them to go along. So, for instance, AppImage no longer will arrive with the upcoming Ubuntu or its flavors. And that includes Flatpak as well. Ubuntu is sticking with its own snap method for doing that, and the plain vanilla .deb format that we had before. That's not to say that they're prohibiting them in any way. They will carry the other ones on their site as optional uploads for those that are ready and won't get confused. So that's the Ubuntu side of the story. The one that says Ubuntu flavors agree, the agree is in quotes because there was some pressure applied. Whether it's correct or not, whether it's Ubuntu trying to do an Apple-style isolation of everything else is under debate. But the bottom line is Photox, which is my favorite photo program, was installing with AppImage. Now someone who just downloads Ubuntu will think you can't handle Photox because you can't handle AppImages. And it had to make major modifications to accommodate that. And that's just one example of many. So that's what this whole set is about. And it'll show up later in other sections because they also had to punt to do something because they weren't installing with snaps. That's all I wanted to say there, I think. So back to you, Jerry.
Okay.
As long as the options are still available to the advanced user by optionally installing the needed runtime, I don't see a particular problem.
No, neither do I.
Unless you're one of those thousands of apps that has to redesign.
Well, you
Who
don't have
has to redesign what?
no. Cornelix needs to include a. You may need to have a prerequisite for the app image runtime to his how to install page.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't have to repackage the new way if he doesn't want to, and we had reasons for not wanting to.
Mm-hmm.
You might be the person to talk to him about that.
Probably I'll have to reread what our reasons for not doing so last time were.
Right.
Back to you.
I think the next one
Okay.
is Algod.
We've got the AVIF format, file format images for images supported by Converter XNView. Converter is essentially an image magic package, which has been pretty good down the years. So that's pretty decent. I haven't used XNView at all.
That's another change Photox just made, and it turned out it was really simple because it was already hiding in one of the packages Photox had been using. And I think Algot had a presentation on this. Am I correct?
Yep.
Algod, you seem to be muted.
Which I just did here.
I'm just trying to read his lips.
Can't hear you.
He's not actually muted, he's just disabled his microphone.
Oh, you muted? Then I can't hear anybody.
Take your earplugs out, Bill.
Right. He
I-
muted.
Do we have an Algot?
No,
Oh,
he seems
I'm
to-
hearing something.
maybe we should come back to it.
Why don't we come back to Algot?
Okay.
And
The
Libra
next
panel.
two items I can tell you quickly.
Okay.
They both happened already, as you can see. And as of a day or two ago, they did not yet have the 2023 videos online as they do for prior years. So I'd say look back on those two links in a day or a week, and see. They should be up shortly.
Okay. And we've got Mozilla Festival 2023 with the videos from back in March 20th to 24th.
Same message. We're
Yep.
waiting for the videos to go online.
Talking about Libra Planet.
Okay, and FOSS history.
Oh.
Dick, is this one you want to do?
I'm totally confused on this one because we had it last month. We have it this month. Did we
Yep.
skip it last month? I'm not sure.
No.
I think it's a good read from back when as to how awkward Linux was not that long ago, and that's not the current message. So I think that's all. It's a good read.
Yeah. Okay, now we're coming up to hot software, and Dennis is going to show us creating a Flatpak, I believe. Dennis, are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
Wait a minute. Am I here?
I'll
Okay.
unshare. There we go. I'm not sharing.
Okay. You should be seeing my screen now.
There it comes.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, we got it.
All right. So I decided to investigate how to create a flat pack. You need to go over and create a YAML file, which is basically it's just like a tag, colon, and values with some indenting in it. So I looked online and found my original plan was to do a flat pack of Mojotron, but flat packs assume that you are installing in this same way a Linux program usually installs. So the bin goes into the bin folder, and there's a separate share folder for all the other content. Right now, Mojotron isn't set up that way. So rather than fight with that, I decided to try it with Fight or Perish. So this YAML file is taken from one that I found online for packaging a different project and did some changes for what I needed for Fight or Perish. It's pretty simple, actually. So the big thing is that it needs to know how to build the project. Now, for this particular project, it's using CMake. CMake has a standard way of doing building the makefile, building the project, and installing the project. And so because of that, it just has this one command on it of build system CMake, and that is sufficient to tell Flatpak all it needs to know. That and just telling it where to get the source code. So in this case, it's getting it from GitLab in this Git repository. You pass it a few options to tell it to use this app/bin and app/share instead of the user folders. And it handles everything for you for creating it. So at that point, you just go over and get the YAML file and run this Flatpak builder command. And it will proceed to build and install the application. Now, in this case, it has it all in cache, so it doesn't actually end up building anything because I've already built it. And this is updating because it just changed. And so the Flatpak is installed. Now, this Flatpak is not up on anything yet, so it's not on FlatHub. You can't go over and install it from there yet, but it's installed locally. I can click open here to just start it running. It gives you all sorts of information about it. Now, one thing I will mention is that this is listed as potentially unsafe. So the way it was originally, you'll see that it has this file system home. That means that it has permission to write to your entire home directory. When you do that, Instead of being potentially unsafe, I believe it just says that it's unsafe. So since Fight or Perish doesn't need that, I went over and removed that permission. And so this is the updated file. And so it no longer has that permission to it. However, it's still listed as potentially unsafe. And the reason it says that it is potentially unsafe is can access hardware devices.
Which is sort of necessary for a game.
Well, the big thing is that it's needed for game controllers. So if you wanted it to only support the keyboard, you could get rid of this device all, and then it would no longer complain about the security of it. But at the same time, I think most gamers look at it as if I plug in a controller, it should just work. I looked at information about why this is, and apparently it's a known issue and they just haven't figured out how to resolve it yet. So unfortunately, I'm stuck with the situation of the game has to be listed as potentially unsafe. But as I said, it does build really easily, so I was pretty impressed with that. You do have to have all the tools that you need installed locally because Flatpak Builder will actually build it on your machine. But overall, it's a pretty easy process of building the program and creating a Flatpak. With that, I will turn it back over to Jerry.
Thank you, Dennis. And let me go ahead and reshare.
While Jerry's sharing, can you hear me yet?
We certainly can.
Yes.
Oh, good.
My share isn't responding to my mouse. Let's try again.
If we aren't busy, can we confirm that people can hear me?
I can hear you too, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there we go. Okay.
I'm gonna mute
Now
you.
we've got, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, we're now down to Ubuntu 23.04 beta. And the beta release, I know very little about Ubuntu, except I don't like it. But Dick, can you talk about that, or Bill?
I tend to use the long-term support releases, so I haven't really looked at the beta either. Dick?
Okay. Yeah,
And
well,
Dick is moving his lips but muted.
okay. So essentially, Ubuntu comes out with releases every 6 months. So for 2023.04 is be April, and that'll be released sometime this month. I don't recall. I read what the date was, but I don't recall that. And then, of course, we've got Blend OS, and this is by Young. I don't know how old Rudra is. He's still a teenager, and he was the one that did, I believe, the Unity on Ubuntu after Canonical dropped it. I don't know anything about Vanilla OS at all. All I can read here is Orchid will move its base from Ubuntu to Debian. And somebody,
Gotta love the name Orchid there.
okay.
Jill, just
Okay.
raise your hand. And if either Jill or Dick would unmute themselves, they could talk.
Okay.
There is something about the upcoming release that has become controversial, and that is that Ubuntu Canonical is dropping support for Flatpak. In other words, they're not going to build in Flatpak.
Yep.
That's what Dick discussed at the top of the meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, Dick
So
is ready.
These are various waves that are fanning out from that item. The official flavors of Linux had to stop packaging those other items in with the bare version. So various ones are doing various things. Now, again, I use Ubuntu-Unity, so I see the action from that corner. Other people are using other very nice versions of Linux also, and they'll see it differently. So you see more of my notes here on this one, but for this month or for next month, I would certainly encourage others to see what else is on a roll and what's being done. Now, looking at them, the Ubuntu and the Ubuntu Unity are now out in beta release. They are runnable. I'd say they're pretty trustworthy at this point, but they're lacking those items unless you do an upgrade. If you do an upgrade from your earlier version, they'll stay in. I thought that was sort of nice as a compromise point, but it's all debatable. And then we come to the Ubuntu Unity. It doesn't have App Image Aboard now by agreement. So I think that might be a big reason why its author, Ruja Saraswat, its lead author, has now brought out Blend OS. A month ago, I knew about Blend OS, but I didn't know about this problem. I expect it's a major driver. That one is not an official flavor of anybody, but it claims if you're at home in any of 4 major flavors, Ubuntu being only one of those, you'll be at home in it. He's trying to get them all back together instead of to separate them out into more unique. So very interesting. It's the same author who's coming out with a different alternative direction. I like that as a general concept. Whoops. Let me see. I just lost the agenda showing, but I've got one here. Let me go find it. The vanilla story is also interesting. I think Vanilla is doing the same thing. They're moving their base from Ubuntu to its parent version, Debian Linux. That, of course, does not require pulling out those package managers. So I think that's part of the story. I also observe that it's going from version 22.10 to version 2.0. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone doing that before. And I checked in several places. It seems to be official. So perhaps someone would like to look it over and tell us about it next month. It looks interesting. It's still those same waves fanning out. Uh, and let's see. I guess that's all on those. I'll just mention very quickly that Back in Time was not getting updated for a long time. And now it is. It's an alternative backup program, does incremental backups very nicely, friendly for beginners, and we've liked it with clients. We think it's the one we choose. Uh, and it's back and gotten an upgrade, so I'm glad to see that, and some other people will be.
Yeah, I
Uh,
like Back in Time. It works very seamlessly, and it's very easy to go to your your save sets. But it also if your backup is on a Linux or Unix file system, it's also linked together. So it uses hard links, which reduces a lot of space.
It does minimal amounts of storage and gives you maximal amounts of information, and very easy for a beginner to just go back and look a month back and see what the change was or whatever, and to restore something from earlier when and if you wish you could. Very cool.
Or you can just copy the files to someplace else without doing an actual restore
Right.
function, which is, although they may end up being locked and you have to go in and unlock them.
Joe? Oh.
Jerry, I think I'm next. Can I share my screen?
Certainly. Let me unshare. Should be ready.
Just a moment. Okay. We use screenshot quite a lot here. Sometimes we're on a Zoom and we want to copy somebody's notes that they're putting up on the screen. And as you can see, I've got a ton of screenshots here, and they're all PNGs, with the exception of the second one showing, because Ubuntu's the screenshot that Ubuntu uses defaults to PNG. So when Dick asked me to talk about this, the first thing I did was say, go to the link he had, which was, let's see if I can get there easily. There it is. This is from 10 years, almost 11 years ago. How to save screenshots as JPG automatically. And the answer, he says, navigate to org GNOME screenshot. And I'm saying to myself, so I said, okay, let me go find the folder called org, of which there is none now. So I did a search for GNOME screenshot and found out that it's now a file called org.gnome screenshot. So I said, well, I'm much more comfortable using Genie. I will try to go there. And I found the file and I found where I put the default in, and I changed the default to JPG, and I tested, and lo and behold, it did not work. It went back to PNG. I mean, it stayed at PNG. So I said, damn, I'm going to have to use let me see if I can get to it. I'm going to have to use the dconf editor. And it says dconf editor is available for installation. And so I went to look for it in Synaptic Package Manager, and it said it was already installed, which is nice. So I tried to start it from the terminal window, and terminal window says, I don't have anything called dconf-editor. So I went to the dash and I typed in dconf, and lo and behold, it's there. So I clicked on it, and it's you have to promise that you'll be careful. And I found that it was already at org/gnome/ and something else. So I went and navigated to GNOME screenshot, and there it is. Default is ping, current value is ping, use default value is on. So it's not on. That's on. Default value was on then. So I turned it off, and down here, I was going to type in JPEG, but I didn't realize that they had a nice little drop-down menu. So I clicked on JPG, clicked on apply, and let me go back here to this. And I did a screenshot, print screen, and there's my JPG. And I open it with the default opener, and yay, it worked. So it wasn't as difficult as I made it out to be, because I tried to double think everything too much. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. It is indeed fairly simple to use. Don't believe literally the answers to the person's question that the link takes you to. And that's all I have to say.
What's the motivation for taking low fidelity screenshots instead of pixel perfect screenshots?
Well,
Just a minute.
why don't I answer that? Because we have unusually high resolution display screens. We lucked out, and they're 2560 by 1440 pixels. Most laptops think they're sharp when they're 1920 by 1080 pixels. We don't see any screen loss of any kind using .jpeg, and it's more usable across more applications that we happen to like.
And another thing is that they default to the pictures folder in home. We have a very large partition called user data where we try to put all our data. Well, the pings are considerably larger. If you can notice, 698, and this one 361.8 is like half as big for JPEG. And otherwise, I have to go in and keep cleaning things out of my home folder much more often if I'm using it. And you can see that we indeed do a lot of screenshots at times. So
now, what was the counter argument, please?
it's lossless.
No, I mean somebody else had one. So
that was.
Was it Jerry?
It was Bill.
It was Bill, and if you screenshots, it's sometimes useful for them to be pixel perfect, particularly if you're like giving feedback to Mike Cornelison. So you don't have to screenshot the entire screen if the window isn't the full screen. My monitor's 3.5K wide, and I do not do a full screen screenshot. I either select the area to screenshot or active window only. That cuts
if we're using this print screen button on the keyboard, and for some reason mine always does a full screen, Dick's, if he just hits the print screen, it only does the upper left quadrant.
But I can adjust that window.
But he can, but I'm not quite sure how to do that. A lot of times we're watching something, we want to grab it, it's only on the screen for a few seconds. So,
okay, so doing it with the button instead of doing it with the icon that's saved to the favorites bar,
Right.
gives you choices, but you're going for fast.
right.
I have two choices on my keyboard, both instant. One is just press the print screen button, one in from the top right, next to delete on my keyboard. And the other choice, and when I press that, I'll get a default quadrant, or I can reshape it the way I wish. But that's a hassle. I can't reshape it in 2 seconds that something might be on screen. The other thing to do, and it's what I almost always do, is I hold down the Alt button while I tap print screen. I get a full screen copy that way. I end up with whatever it translates to at 2560 by 1440, my screen. And I can go in later and improve and sharpen that if I have any reason I want to. If I'm doing a normal image, that 2560 is small. My smartphone can do better than that. But we also have that wonderful program for sharpening things later, one of the tools in Photox. So it really works. It has a lot of sharpening flavors, by the way, including ones for moving objects and one for just plain blurry. A lot of reasons for trade-offs there. But this was the solution to a nasty problem for us.
So under Fedora, the latest version of Fedora, when you're using Wayland, when you hit the print screen button, it'll give you the option of doing the full screen, a window, or a selection area. But it also goes over and it seems to take what is currently on the screen and saves it while you're deciding. So that way you could instantly press it and you can get that whatever was on the screen. And then once it's done saving that image, it then goes over and updates the display to whatever is current. So for in my case, when I'm taking a screenshot of a game, I get that exact instant in the game, even if I stop to say, do only that window. Now, it does mean that you oftentimes die in the game because the game's still playing, even though you can't see the screen anymore.
We're usually into lectures on art or something like that, and we want to grab that portrait before it's gone. I like half the features you're describing very much.
Yeah.
I've already submitted a comment on this, suggesting that change of the default ought to be out at the operating system level, not down in a deep inside routine that's hard to find. That would solve the problem for anybody very quickly. We'll see how soon it happens.
If at all.
And I'm really glad to hear comparing between versions, what different solutions there are to the same puzzle.
Jerry, back to you.
Okay, I was just looking. I was thinking from my past changes that DConf editor does have an option for the print screen default. I'll look that up since I'm on here right now. So let's share the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, I did find an area in dconf editor where it will do that.
Yeah.
The clue was hard to find, but once you have it, there it is.
Okay, Mike. Okay. Now we're back to share screen.
Yay.
Let me just see what I'm looking for here. Okay.
The next item is Linux command line, apparently a book or online book or something.
Oh, I can explain those quick. They're freebies for the downloading or reading online. And for the techies who do programming, we've been leaning a lot on that lately. Beginners take heart. It's not always this techie. But if you want to get into command line programming, these are wonderful references at your fingertips. That's all. Just click if you want them.
Yeah. So for those of us who have written some extensive shell applications, that's the Linux command line. And it used to be years ago, there were multiple shells. There still are, but Bash is the default shell for Linux. But you had the original shell, what's called the Bourne shell. And of course, you used to have the C shell. And I've got one guy on our install fest uses the C shell all the time. And it makes things very complicated the way he uses his system. But in any case, command line is pretty extensive, and I talked about that quite a bit when I was teaching Linux at Northeastern. And we're in hot hardware, and this is all a Dick Miller thing. Gonna talk about?
The
hardware.
yeah. Okay. First of all, we talked at some length about this particular speaker, which we thought was pretty nice, but we were just getting into it. A few months later, I want to report we're just astonished how much we like it. We reach for one of them just to listen to most anything that we're listening to. We use laptops most of the time, so we just put this somewhere near it. It's a Bluetooth connection, no wires needed. And for its size and its price, the sound is just stunning. Yes, I can do better at $300, but we're talking around $30. The reason I brought it up again, and you've got a reference to the January item in our recorded version. We now are really confident. We've learned a lot more about them and how to use them even better. We have two new ones. We had one used one before. And the two new ones, we can set up far apart from each other and have about the deepest stereo in the room you've ever heard, and plenty loud to fill a big, big room. or the backyard for that matter. Impressively loud, stays accurate with good bass when it gets loud. They're awfully good. There's other ones that may be competitive, and we'll let you know when we find one. In fact, we have one due to arrive. I'll bet it's tomorrow, right after the meeting. But a month later, we'll know what to say about it. But these typically go new from $40 to $80. If you go look at it at a place that lists a lot, we like eBay for that. You'll see a huge range, but you'll also see a range of something else. The something else is Unz. With a name like that, you got to be good. But Unz puts out a line of speakers, and they all look very similar until you know enough. And the Ultra on this description is critical to get this speaker. They've got $20 new speakers that are smaller, but they can't keep good sound quality nearly as loud, not as powerful, and the battery won't last as long. This Ultra is the one we're pitching. You've got its full name there. If you go to someplace like eBay and search for it, you're apt to come out with a lot of the other flavors too. So don't just search for lowest price. Make sure it's actually the Ultra.
And a lot of the sellers seem to not understand that there's any difference.
Right. So I find a lot of mislistings until you look close. Sometimes I see it listed as Ultra, but you go in and look at the details, and it's not an Ultra. People tend to blur all these things together. So we've got a place that knows what it is. I prefer not to shop at Amazon, but they've got the good price on this on a steady basis. They've also got good description and user comments. So that's all. I'm updating it and saying, yeah, we really think that's the one to go for. If someone thinks they've got us beat, I'd like to hear about it and sample it and see how they compare. So you can read about it over on Amazon, and you can order it from there, or you can see if this day there's a particularly much better bargain available through eBay, but not the ones that are on a slow boat from China, unless you have that time. That's it for that one. Was there other ones in the same set?
Well, PCIe 5.0 SSDs.
Somebody else brought this one up, and I kept it in sight on the agenda list. Who was discussing that? I think a few people were.
Maybe Bob Premack and Bill Ricker. Am I wrong?
I definitely noticed it. I don't remember if I discussed it.
It would be Ed P, the fellow who posts a whole bunch of stuff. And I was simply saying that in other user groups, this has been discussed, and the technical people were talking about how much heat has to be dissipated, and these incredible heat sinks you see either sold separately or sold with the SSDs. They are, however, incredibly fast.
And does that matter or not with typical programs?
They're probably in the range that you would not need unless you were a really avid gamer or doing a lot of video transcoding or something, where you need really fast transfers. Otherwise, the amount of heat generated is just it's just unjustifiable at the moment.
Yeah.
I think even a gamer is not going to get much use out of this because most games are going to be optimized to keep everything in memory and will be optimized such that as you move to a new area, it will load it up fast enough that it doesn't matter how fast the hard drive is. So I think this is something that'd be much better for someone who's using so much data that it can't all be kept in memory. So
And
like video.
And
I think
since
it's more,
requires a newish Windows API, its extra features may not be supported on our Linux kernel yet.
and probably more for servers.
Also plausible. So interesting to note, but not anything I'm going to run out and buy.
I would suspect that until these AI and VR applications get farther along, we won't be needing anything like this.
We live next to a lake, so if I can just get a waterproof laptop, we might have the cooling. Not tempted either. Bob's up next.
No, Alcott,
Oh,
making a web page.
oh, this is one that's not on that agenda. But Algot had said anytime that's convenient, he'd like to talk about how to make a web page.
Is this a good time?
One of the few extra ones I mentioned.
Is this a good time, Alcott?
It depends on whether you can hear me.
Yes.
We can hear you.
You're good now.
I have no idea what went wrong before. Making a web page is actually something that I do a lot. So if you're interested in the basics, I could go there. I have a link that I can send to you for the basic description of what to do, if that's of interest.
I think we have time, but maybe you'd rather do it next month, whatever.
No,
just-
I'm fine with starting that. Leaving the image issue aside, I guess, because that was earlier in the agenda and my system was kicking me out somehow.
You want to go back to that, Dick?
Oh,
No. It doesn't matter to me. They're both available.
I personally would like to hear the .avi one today and maybe set this up for next month.
That works for me. Okay. Earlier in the presentation time, I did send the link for the AVIF and other versions of storage for images, but I'm going to share here and just make a quick comparison that links to what Jill was going to talk about, or maybe has, about the screenshot issue.
Yes,
So,
I've already talked about it.
Okay, let me share my screen here.
And I just took a
Live
screenshot.
streaming is on.
Web images come in a whole bunch of varieties. BMP was something that Windows people were very familiar with, and it has died a beautiful death. It had very large file sizes, and nobody really uses that anymore if they can avoid it. And I'm getting a huge amount of feedback on this. Sounds like people are not muted.
Dick, can you mute?
No, this one here.
Okay, I don't hear it now. Oh, yes, I do.
Whoever doesn't hear it needs to mute.
PNG and GIF. I'm going to say the letter because nobody knows how to pronounce GIF or GIF. There's a huge argument about that down every talk place you go. But the thing that they both represent are not photo images generally. PNG has gotten better, but is not really great for photo images. Photo images more often are found using JPEG. And what's interesting are the two new versions of photo image storage. One is called the AV1 or AVIF, new photo quality format. And it's so new that just a few of the browsers actually deal well with it. And there's been little pickup on it in the web area yet. People aren't using it much. Still, JPEG is very popular. The alternative one is JPEG XL, but that hasn't been implemented. So let's quickly compare sizes here. If it's not a photo image, a BMP would be 209.7 kilobytes. The SVG, which is not a bit image, but a vector image, is only 21.7 kilobytes. The PNG is 17. The JPEG is 13. The WebP, which I sort of skipped over, but is a very new, mostly substitute for PNG. And then the GIF or GIF. And I think except for the GIF, you're getting a fairly good image here. I think you should look at the original version rather than trying to see the differences on your screen in this presentation, because it's 3 times removed by this point. And if you go into another layer of looking at this, you'll see that that the SVG has no loss when you expand it. The WebP has some, but more blurry trouble with the image. And the GIF, very, very jagged on my screen. And you may see it that way too. Photo images are what we typically think of as being important with JPEG. And I can't tell any difference with the AVIF between these two images of a flower that is quite beautiful, and a wildflower at that. The AVIF can be set to be more condensed. And if you have that more condensed, you can get it to be a smaller image. And I don't think it looks bad either way. What I would like to point out here at the bottom of the screen are that there are links to a very good description at the tutorial mentioned there. And very quickly, I'd like to do a screenshot comparison which shows these images of stored space for a screenshot. Granted, screenshots are not designed for photo images, really. You're better off saving the original if you can get the largest size and then manipulating it from there. But if you compare the sizes, a PNG version is pretty large for a screenshot, 394 kilobytes, compared to 363 kilobytes for the JPEG. But then if you go down to AVIF, it's only 60. It's actually bigger for a text-like screenshot. And finally, the WebP, which really cuts you way down for size. And that would be why I think this is going to become a very popular format. By contrast, doing a screen capture of the image style images, the photo style images, you'll see that WebP is the very smallest. AVIF is bigger than JPEG. I'm kind of having mixed feelings about this AVIF, but I think it's intriguing to note that people are working very hard to reduce this time that it takes to get a web page that is heavily image driven, which is true of a lot of mine. So I'm going to relinquish the screen here and then get back to listening.
Hello?
Okay,
Everybody back? Oh,
I hear sound.
okay.
Okay, you hear sound.
I'll mute again. That was me.
Hi, Dave.
So let's see, we're still on hot internet. Have we talked about the NordVPN?
Not yet.
No. I think, Bob, you were going to talk about that?
Yeah, however, in order to get to the link, I am going to have to find that again. It's meshnet something, NordVPN,
Okay.
because I'm not in my email right now.
Oh, do you want me to relinquish my share?
Let's see whether I can find this yet. I would have to get into my email, so we might just as well do something else while I do that.
Okay. Somebody was going to talk about Mastodon philosophy, which is much, much different than Twitter. Dick, I think you're muted. Dick, you're muted.
Got it, I think. True?
Okay, we can hear
Can
you
you hear
now.
me?
We can hear you now.
Good. Okay. This Mastodon one, I think, was also carried over from last month. And it's simply a good read that might lead to someone wanting to do something more with it next month. So I think give it a click later and see if it's of group interest. And similarly, wallpaper from the public domain. I think you just want to look at it and see if it suits you. I've gotten a lot of enjoyment from using it, and we'll often grab some wonderful image and then take photogs and see if we can make it more wonderful or more bent to some particular purpose. So this looks like a new mother lode of good images for that. Just recommend taking a look, giving it a try.
Ask Bob if he's ready now.
And again, Ubuntu flavored, but I think there's things like this for most of the popular Linux flavors. I'll mention the ones I see, and they're Distro Watch, which covers what new is coming out with which of the many Linux distributions, flavors. Um, Ubuntu Weekly Newsletter is really good if you're using Ubuntu, or as we do, a close derivative of it. And resources for newcomers similarly. So they have links to all of those in the weekly newsletter. If you're using Ubuntu, I suggest you have that at hand, that link. And for other users, my encouragement is for people using the other flavors. I'd like to hear what they're doing that's like that. And so probably would other people who may be using it.
Ask Bob if he's ready.
What?
Ready.
Bob is ready to do his that we skipped.
Okay, perfect timing.
First, let me see if I can share my screen, and whoever's got their speaker on may mute. Okay, good. Now let me see about screen sharing. Share screen. This is what I want. Here we have it. Everybody seeing it? Does everyone?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now we can do this. NordVPN is a very reputable, non-free VPN company. And they not only have VPN tunneling that you can get through them, and this is end-to-end encryption that they have there. You'd have to look up their pricing. I'm not going to do that right now. But they have a new product, which they call MeshNet file sharing and peer-to-peer. So anyone who's dabbled with asking friends and contacts for a VPN recommendation has probably heard of NordVPN. And so they do have a free version, which I would not mess with. There, I could do a sidebar on why you don't want to mess with a free VPN. But there is a product they have called MeshNet, which is free of charge, although you will get more out of it if you also use NordVPN with it. What is MeshNet? It's a way to safely access other devices, remote access, no matter where they are in the world. Once set up, this product functions to the end user as though it were a local area network. Actually, it's probably more of a wide area network, but anyway, they say it functions and looks to you like a LAN, and it'll probably list on most PCs as a LAN. It connects devices directly with each other, which is the peer-to-peer part of it. This makes MeshNet a great fit for activities that require high speed, low latency, and advanced end-to-end security. And it's really good security. And there isn't any logging at NordVPN either. So activities like file sharing, active work collaborations, and intense multiplayer gaming. So let's start out. If you didn't have MeshNet, look at all these different things you would have to do. You'd have to make connections using maybe your ISP to get to somebody else's PC a long distance away. And you might have to use your office VPN to get to your work PC. A firewall would be involved in getting to a web server. There's port forwarding involved if you want to get to your file storage, your home PC, or maybe your media center. And you might have a gaming server you're trying to use for multiplayer gaming, and that requires its own port forwarding. Pretty complicated, eh? So with MeshNet, you have one centralized hub which is on your device. This is where it looks a lot like a LAN. And you transparently do these other kinds of connections. In other words, the MeshNet is doing direct peer-to-peer rather than making you go through your ISP or your local network or whatever you're doing. Your gateway or modem is acting relatively passively in this setup. You're tunneling through it. So they recommend applications like gaming, remote device access, like if you have to help somebody who's not very good with tech, and we all have somebody we support. File sharing with various people. Maybe somebody wants to share a joint project, like maybe somebody's working on a game or a video or something. And the security is as good as the NordVPN security, no better, no worse. And so there are other possibilities you can explore also. You can't really eliminate your ISP using this because you still need internet service. But your ISP cannot see what's going on inside of MeshNet. Whereas if you did this with regular remote access, you might or might not be able to hide what you're doing from your ISP if that's important to you. You can link up to 50 external devices and 10 devices of your own, which come from your local network. It's very low configuration, and it handles the traffic routing. So there's traffic management and things like that built in. And a lot of folks seem to like it. And you can download it for free and try it, so what's the risk? I think eventually it's probably going to be a subscription service if you don't have NordVPN. And it may be some kind of a higher tier of service or a value-added service for people who do have NordVPN. So I don't think NordVPN is a bad VPN, but if you want something open source, use something open source instead. So I'm going to close this window and this window, go over here and ask if anyone has any questions before I stop my share.
Well, I had
Feedback. We'll have feedback.
Oh, nice.
You got it. All right.
I had a question,
Yes, Joe.
but you already answered it. I said, wait a minute, how can this work with you're not going on your ISP? But then you answered that, so
Your ISP is used.
yeah,
It basically is the base network.
yep.
So, like your home network on the LAN would be your ISP provided network.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
This sounds great for helping a beginner with either the computer or given app.
Yeah. Even an advanced user who's not familiar with a particular program. Like Photox. Or maybe point out a bug to the developer.
Better yet. Right. Excellent. Glad to have that free at my
Does
disposal.
anybody want to comment on what they think of NordVPN security and their reputation?
I know their reputation is pretty good, but I haven't really tried it or really researched it very much.
Same here, except I did look online for independent reviews. Quite good.
Yeah, I believe they are trusted by many tech authors, though maybe not every security person thinks they're perfect.
Serious security people don't believe in perfect.
Okay. But
Perfect is yesterday, not tomorrow.
yeah, maybe good enough for most people. Yes, I
Speaking of-
see Bill.
Speaking of which,
Yeah, I'm changing the subject a little bit. I'm going back, but I actually tried Photox the other day for a little project my wife gave me. She needed me to fix up a picture that she took, and I had to unblur it and everything else. So I spent a few hours on Photox, and then my printer disappeared.
well, they're fixing that bug, Jerry.
Yeah. Well, that was only because I took my printer off of USB and put it on the internet. I put it on the network, and so that changed all the printer settings. I had to delete the old ones and just find the new ones.
So you didn't click on the erase printer option?
Yes, I did.
Oh. I
Goes
think we're
back.
getting
Okay, so I just discovered that closing a tab does end the screen share of that tab, and thereby ended my entire screen share. Something I need to know about in the future.
that was good.
Because I made
Sure.
that mistake and got kicked out of a meeting once.
Let's put on my sound again, right?
So we just scroll up a little bit.
Shall I cover the next few, get into them?
Shall you cover what? Sure.
I think I'll give a quick overview and then wade into one of them. I think there'll be good debate on this section.
Okay.
The first item on my list, I think you don't have yet. It's can you fully delete your browser search history? I think the post was a day or so ago, and I thought it was pretty good. It's got a lot of clues as what you can do to get better control, but not best, over your driver control over your browser history. But I think the most succinct suggestion is, or alternatively, just pick a program that's reliable. And they have one of our great favorites as being reliable. So I'll just recommend it. It'll be in the links tonight, and you can just click on it and read it. I haven't even read it yet. It just sounded like it was dead on for what just came up with Bob a little earlier. Reliable and truly reliable, completely reliable. My answer is reliable as yesterday. You don't know about tomorrow. Next one on the list was be aware of wipe and hack tools. And I put in a good item on each one to look at. These can be powerful if, for instance, your computer got so badly hit with malware that you want to start from scratch, and you mean scratch, not scratch with the malware still hiding at the bottom. How do you really clean it? On the other hand, someone can come in with a little USB thumb drive and clean your computer. We're getting into interesting territory here. Similar with the hack tools, for good and for bad. And they're just the beginning, because this list is getting deeper and deeper into that kind of stuff. Were there any comments on those first ones? You can read them later, but if you have something to add, I'll wait.
Just one comment. There's a reason why some of these, which are actually technician tools, often get labeled hack tools by security scanners. And that is that their behavior is virtually indistinguishable from certain actual hack tools from the dark web. Behaviorally, even though they
All
really do
depends on
different
whose
things.
keyboard is handling it.
That too.
I've used Ultimate Boot CD for years. I haven't downloaded it recently, but I found that gave me a lot of the tools that I needed.
Yeah, and you can load up a Ventoy USB with any tools you want that are on an ISO. So you could have several ISOs with several tools.
Yes.
Exactly.
My Ventoy, my thumb drives are now half or so Ventoy and half not. And I've got more tools on it than I could imagine before. Wonderful. Well, forging onward from there, hang on while I get to there.
Black Arts
Black Arch Linux, one of the many, has issued a comment. Unet bootin was the old way you'd move a downloaded file onto first your thumb drive, or back then a CD, and then move it into your computer as a working operating system or such. They're saying don't use UNetBootin to write .iso files to flash drives. And that includes thumb drives and more. And my question was, are they worried about certain ISO files, or is this a generic defect? I don't know the answer yet. But I did put right after it what we just talked about, Ventoy.
Yeah.
Go to Ventoy instead, and you won't have this issue.
Dick,
Yep.
Black Arch is a penetration testing distribution.
Oh, right.
So that it's it may be quite sensitive to how its boot file is handled, and they may very specifically not want UNetBootin or Ventoy to
Or Ventoy.
As the bootloader in front of them. They want to be a single-use item that they have their bootloader on. And if you have special magic in your bootloader, then yeah, you don't want UNetBootin or Ventoy or anybody else's bootloader taking over and supplanting your bootloader. Most of us don't need that magic in a bootloader, and the Ventoy is obviously preferable because then you get a nice menu.
Yeah, and from that menu, it is possible to select on many ISOs one of several different possible bootloaders they have. But it still does not get rid of the possibility of initially doing something that Black Arch would not like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Black Arch probably wants to check if certain hardware features are enabled in BIOS or blocked in BIOS, and can it insert a hypervisor? So it may have some scary stuff in its bootloader that's necessary for its function. If you're either a white hat pen tester or a black hat industrial espionage person.
Yeah, so it has to test at a lower level than and at an earlier stage than would be allowed with anything created with UNetBootin or Ventoy.
That is my presumption, and we shouldn't take their recommendation not to use other tools with their tool as applicable to any other ISOs.
Yeah.
On the other hand, our reasons for preferring Ventoy to our previous recommendation, UNetBootin, remain well taken.
Yeah, it's just a matter of today's flash drives are so much larger. Why waste all the space making, each ISO into one flash drive? Then again, if things fail, you'll lose everything. On the other hand, you can create a directory that consists of ISOs and put it onto any kind of backup you've got. And they just copy directly. That's so neat.
This reminds me of the atomic bomb race that went on a long time ago. Fantastic promise for the future, but the first most obvious use was to end a war. And look at all the fallout we've had, so to speak, since then.
I'm not going to forgive that pun.
Well, it's these are powerful tools, and they're going to be used by good people and bad people. And the good people are going to have to worry about the bad people and develop their own bad uses for it. Mutually assured self-destruction. Remember that argument? And we spend a lot of our budget on it. Not here, but in the countries. So
Have we already covered the AI topics? Because they seem to tie in with what you're saying, Dick.
exactly. This is just scratching the surface. This year, in my opinion, and many other people's opinion, that nuclear race is going to be an AI race. They've had major breakthroughs. Some of them are out there as toys. We visited a friend last night, and one of their grandchildren heard about this and whipped out his smartphone and showed me one of these chatbots playing chess with him and doing damn well. He said the only catch is occasionally it cheats. and that's a small, free, readily available program. So the big ones are bigger. Let me just say that covers a lot more.
The cool thing is that his grandfather was one of the people who initiated chess playing programs at MIT's AI lab originally back in the 50s, 60s.
One of our friends that caused us to move to Boston in the first place.
Which programs
the second wave of AI programmers.
And those programs didn't cheat because they actually knew the rules, as opposed to creating plausible rules by automated plagiarism.
The game has changed. I measured that last night by showing him what these things can do, and he was just stunned. Totally.
These large language models are being seriously overhyped. They're tools to create plausible sequence of sentences, but they do not operate on knowledge like GitHub Copilot. Their robotic plagiarism devices, not knowledge. Their facts may be completely made up or based on fiction that it found online somewhere in its training. There is not actual knowledge or understanding. It is automated mansplaining.
Yeah, building on that, Bill, Noam Chomsky wrote a recent article about these chatbots, and he analyzed the language models. Chomsky, as we know, is a language expert, and his article is very, very interesting. I'll find it online and I'll post the URL.
I believe it's already in the links.
Oh, if it is, that's great.
I'm not sure, but I think
We'll send
it's
it
one of
along
the-
to make sure that we've got it.
Send it and we'll compare notes and see.
Yeah.
In any case, well, I think you're giving one view, and I think there's a lot of views out there, and that's the problem. First of all, as to whether there's going to be a race to bring it to market or to weaponize it for sabotaging someone else's system, government, or just commercially.
It is very
powerful tool.
It's already a powerful tool for propaganda because, as I said, it creates plausible sequences of sentences, irrespective of truth. And there are certain politicians who've been doing that manually, and this automates their process of throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks.
I think we already see a lot of that, but can't discriminate it yet. And tools are coming for that as well.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it's getting better too. So it is a race on many different levels. And I've talked to AI people who think it's all too real, and that the monetary benefit of getting in early is bringing all the big boys into it, and they're buying up the smaller ones and modifying with them. And we'll see what comes out of the hash later. This year is apt to be the big turning point on this getting to be serious for business, for gaming and everything in between. And as you say, for putting out false messages. One of my personal interests is new technology being applied to brainwashing. I've been getting the numbers on it, but
That's
how
one of
it's
the few
getting,
practical applications for this.
yeah, one of them just came up and it's coming up again next election. And
Large language models have no intrinsic intelligence, and people saying that they are the final stepping stone
I didn't
to
say that.
artificial general intelligence are either not understanding or are engaging in hype to pump the stock. And it's really kind of distressing that we have
Oh,
two
thanks.
sets of snake oil, blockchain and chat GPT, generative large language models running at the same time, because I don't have the energy to debunk both.
I think we find out later on this one, no matter what anyone's opinion is, as to whether they are sentient or not. That's exactly what's going to be changing during the coming year if the investments pay off. So we're going to find out. We're getting billions of dollars invested in that turn of what they were and what they will be. Meanwhile, there's little ones out galore. I think Chat GPT is the most popular one out there for home use at the moment. And the kids know a lot more about it than the grown-ups. In addition, I've got a big list here, and I've included Google is in on it. Microsoft is in on it, but they also bought a big chunk of OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, and other projects. And Microsoft also has Sydney. I believe Sydney is the one, and no, Google's BARD program. I think it's something about the beginning of February. You could run it, and by the end of February, they'd withdrawn it. It was causing problems. It was a little more sentient than they expected. And we can argue what that means, but they took it back for rework or for something different. And other comments about it said it was really built on a bad base. There were better bases out there to build it on. Well, just go out and buy a couple if you're a Google or a Microsoft, and that's been going on. Microsoft also has Sydney, which I think might be a new addition to the list. I'll have it up there tonight. And there's a company that isn't commercial. It's just an incredible group of AI people pooled together by Stanford University. And it's got a project that's put out 3 small chatbots with which you can play with this powerful tool with not its powerful end of the subject. And the Vicuna one that they're just shifting to now just came public. You can use it for non-commercial purposes. And lo and behold, for the first time, not only can you use it on your home computer, you can use it on your home computer without an internet connection. Optional. It'll fit on something as small, listen close for this one, as a Raspberry Pi with 4 gigs of RAM. That's a $55 product that you can load this free software onto and have it dedicated to having AI operating a gadget, or maybe back onto the internet. Just wait to see how many flavors of that show up as it goes
That
public.
probably requires an internet connection to phone home to do the processing, which means, as with Alexa, your requests are going out to the internet. If it's at least not streaming your voice out to the internet, that's an improvement in privacy.
I think you're wrong, and I give you the item to click on and read in detail. And the answer is you can download different models of that infinite amount of stuff out there on the internet, which part of it you want to have synthesized into something smaller that runs faster and that you can fit on your computer to do your work with the same kind of, quote, mental processing that we all know isn't mental processing, but it can do work on smaller databases very creatively. So read it first.
If we can get the local processing again, that would be nice.
We're talking about tomorrow, not yesterday. Read it and see where it might be going. And in addition to that, the fellow I was visiting last night, the second wave AI hero back when, with the grandkids who are showing him stuff he can't understand. Last name is Bloom. That's why I got interested in one of the hits I got on this, which was called Bloom. As of today, I've added a link, which you'll get tonight, for Bloom and the company that's just made it available publicly, with a demo you can run and a few things like that. And I think they're going to keep most of it for themselves, but they claim they are now the biggest single AI implementation there is out there. And you can go play on that with the internet. So the changes are stunning. They're trying to get everybody to try it to understand what they might do with it. And I'm shuddering over the military and semi-military applications of that little come on.
Oh, yeah. The idea of militarized applications accepting a 90% accuracy rate as an interface, as a decision-making tool, is just atrocious.
9% accuracy rate is maybe for one of the games. It's not serious anymore. It's time to read them. Then think again. So maybe next month we'll have more to say about that.
There are certain militaries in the world actively working now who could use it.
They are using it. It has been used in Ukraine, and it is traced to what particular base it was based on. It is being used. Do you think the U.S. is sitting by idly? I do not. And so on and so forth. Time to read up on it again for next year instead of for last year. The 9% is ridiculous this year.
I said 90%, not 9%. Quote me correctly. And if you look at people using...
I misheard you. I apologize.
People working on GPT 3.5 tool, anytime you get to things that it takes an expert to know if it's wrong, it's wrong.
No.
Just like the newspaper reporting, where
Bob, time to read.
Stories about, they get details wrong.
Oh, Bill, still time to read. There's a lot of conflicting views out there.
Yeah, there are a lot of conflicting views out there. A lot of people are going to have egg on their face.
I'm looking at ones that have traced to successes already, including a lot of bulk mailing to the U.S. that's beginning to sound like it's from the U.S. when it isn't. One of them, I believe, is a simulation of the Pope in video. That's really convincing, but it's a fake. There's a lot of damage you can do with this before it's everything you think it ought to be.
I'm not disagreeing that there's a lot of damage doable with these so-called artificial intelligence generative systems. If you
Mhm.
expect to get truth out of them, if you expect reliability or accuracy without human culling, what we didn't see are the 17 versions of the Pope that looked really ridiculous, aside from the one that was shared only had one deformed hand. But we didn't see the other 17 attempts where that was absolutely silly, which these tools will create. And they have to.
You'll see some of those too on the links I've provided. You'll find out that the good systems are already getting 93% accuracy on new questions. And to me, one of the most interesting things was that some of these teenagers took the little available ones they can run from home and linked two of them to spiral the questions and answers further. Got really interesting results that I shudder to think about.
Just like we used to connect Eliza to Perry.
Yes, exactly. Except this is a new ball game in terms of what they can do. So it's time to stop thinking about it in terms of the old framework. Again, I think a year from now, we'll all be shuddering over some of what happened and delighted with others. And it's going to greatly affect how many people hold onto their jobs.
It also doesn't matter for propaganda purposes whether it's accurate or not. As a matter of fact,
Right.
most of it is not accurate. That's why it's propaganda.
Selective and convincing is where it's all at for propaganda.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Propaganda, like the Pope image, which is generative but not large language model. I mean, that's the application area. People
After you read the ones I've selected,
people who are
after you
suggesting
read the ones I've selected, let's do this on another month. Because you're saying it can't happen, it's been happening.
People are selling it as a replacement for a search engine and getting 90% accurate answers. This is distressing.
I think I've given you one you can click on, which you can set for whether you want it to be accurate or interesting. And you can ask the same question 5 times and watch the same system process it differently each time on purpose so it can be broad-based rather than just hear one story. You really have to catch up with it.
That's not how it's being sold as replacing workers. You're undercutting your own argument.
Read the Bloom one, which is from a very commercial place, making some of it available. And by the way, the company has a name I didn't take seriously until I read more. The corporation name is Hugging Face.
Yeah.
Hugging Face? That doesn't sound like international business machines anymore. And they've got billions of dollars invested, and they probably have the biggest single database and processing package as well available quickly for different applications. So I suggest you read it first, and then we discuss it next month.
I
I
don't need to read your links. I am well informed on these topics. I exited from AI before most of the people doing these new products got out of high school,
Right.
Probably out of diapers. And I'm finding your credulousness distressing and your, just read this, insulting.
I
And therefore, you won't read my links, or you will.
Who's paying me to?
I find that insulting. You're not going to learn because you've settled on a position.
gentlemen, not to
I'm
insult either
looking.
one of
You're
them.
not looking.
Gentlemen, not to insult either
Let's
one of
not
you.
argue. Let's not
Well,
argue that. That's a
Let's change a
philosophy.
little bit. I was reading today about restaurants using robotic wait staffs,
They are.
and there's one here in Framingham.
Yeah.
Well, they won't be
what's
getting
going
my
to-
business.
Yeah, what's going to happen is people will learn that these are just tools that are a starting point, and you need to
Yep.
check everything they produce, all of their output, just like you would
Read all about it.
just
Yeah,
as you
Read
would
all about it. I've provided that.
Just like Fox News viewers check all the facts they're presented with. Yeah, that's
They
gonna work
don't.
well.
They don't. It should never go out raw. Should never go out raw. But
Did I hear the word should?
professional people,
Underline, bold.
professional people can use AI to start their thought process, and then they refine it. If they're good professional people, they refine it and fact check it and fix the errors. But at least they've saved themselves a lot of work up front.
I don't even follow how you're thinking. When 3/4 of the automobile building industry get laid off with the current level, you think that's something to ignore?
I'm not
Let's
suggesting.
continue this. Let's continue this after you've read my links.
No, I'm not suggesting we ignore this.
I
I'm just saying,
realize that.
yeah, there is
You've
a threat.
stopped at that point. They haven't. They're getting incentive to accelerate. Anyway, let's come back to that at another time.
All right.
Science on State Street, I think, speaks for itself. You can click on it. You can be there. We're going to have some good demos, so people might want to come and look. And I'm looking forward to it on April 22nd.
Did you get my computer information? I sent you.
Pardon?
You were asking for models of computer. What you bringing?
Yes, for clues.
Yeah, I sent yours. I sent my computer ID to you.
Well, thanks. There's a lot of mail from the last couple of days I'll be catching up on tomorrow.
Okay, I sent it last week, but
Good. I'll try to catch up on everything through the weekend.
okay.
And I wanted to demonstrate something very much, but I don't want to spend the time now. And it was carried over from last month. We talked about the finger cursor theme. You can just go over to Synaptic Package Manager and look on it. I think the actual cursor image as it moves across the screen is the most fascinating one I've seen yet. Not important, but if you want to show off your computer, you'll love it. It's got a lot of other very interesting symbols you can bring up. So you can just go look for yourself. But I wanted to emphasize that until you've seen it, you haven't seen it. It's really good. Let's see. Algot and Dennis, I guess, have the last words here.
What words do you want from me?
Algot, it says, a Kubobo logic game demo by Algot Runeman.
I thought I did that last month.
Yeah, I think you did.
I stand corrected. You agree, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm shut down. Good. Thank you for doing it. I didn't have time to go back and look. I've been that busy. Let's see, and that leaves Dennis.
Okay. Let me share my screen. And so last month I demoed Fight or Perish. And at that time I had only just started playing around with it, so I had modified the graphics for the walls and the floor tiles. Since that time, I've made a lot more modifications to it. So it's not full screen at the moment, but it has a little demo mode that it runs through automatically. And it's also giving you instructions on how to play while it's running through that. I've also updated the graphics for pretty much everything else. So they used to have these little worm-like creatures as enemies that I assume were just a placeholder. And so now they've been replaced with skeletons. So
This is cute.
if you go to the start, you can go over and pick your character. All of them have graphics now that are better than they were before. Not necessarily great, but better. Originally, when I updated the graphics, I made them I just updated the colors, but I found that that didn't look right. The player needs to be a little bit bigger so that his graphic slightly overlaps the wall. And so that's what you can see here, or probably can't see. Let me go over and change it to full screen. So now you could probably see that the graphic is overlapping the wall above it a little bit. Not a lot, but it just needs that a little bit. And we've got the skeletons here. It has sound effects now for everything. And let me skip over to, there are also some new levels. So level 4 now exists and has a whole bunch more enemies to fight. So these are the skeletons that I've replaced. I also added in some digitized voice into the game. All right, so there I just died. There is also a new level 5, which this one has a new enemy type. So you have this giant eye creature that will shoot blasts at people, including at its own people, so it kills each other sometimes. But it's smart enough to know if somebody is directly in front of it, then it won't try to kill it. I should also mention that one of the other big changes here is that originally the game ran on these squares, and you could only step on the exact square.
Oh.
And now you can see that you can move anywhere. And so that was a big change, that previously one of the characters was slow. And so whenever you use that character, it would be every third frame you can move. So if you actually press the button to move, sometimes you didn't. And as a player, it felt awful. It just did not feel responsive. So I modified it so that now it no longer is restricted to the square movement, and you can move anywhere on the screen.
Live streaming is on.
So those are some of the big changes about it. it does have a configuration screen now, so that you can go over and configure their keyboard controls. You could do that before, but it required you to modify a text file with some magic numbers that you just had to know what number the A key is, which is not exactly something people are going to be able to do. The other thing I did do is I upgraded it from SDL to SDL2. The reason for that is that SDL has support for joysticks, but it doesn't know what they are. So it knows how many joysticks there are, or how many analog joysticks there are, and how many buttons there are. But if you plug in a PlayStation controller or a Xbox controller, the buttons are mapped differently. So you would have to configure it for one particular controller. The SDL2 introduced a game controller interface. And the game controller interface understands all the various different types of controllers and maps them all the same way, so that the top button on the controller will be the same regardless of which controller type you're using. So that's why I switched it to using that, and then it can have a default settings, because if you have no idea what the buttons, which buttons go to which, there's no way to set up some default controls, which is why the original game didn't have any default controls. And so that's what I've been doing with Fight or Perish. I believe the other thing I have was for my changes to Shippy 1984. For that, I created a devlog video, which I can bring up here. And I apologize for the ending with like and subscribe, because you're supposed to do that on YouTube videos, but I really hate it, but it's in there. This is Shippy 1984. It is a game like Space Invaders or Galaxian. Shippy 1984. It is a game like Space Invaders or Galaxian. It was released in 2004 by Ryan Broomfield. The gameplay is not complex, simply shoot all the enemies. There are 2 power-ups. Normally you can only fire 3 shots out at a time. One power-up increases this to unlimited. The other causes 2 shots to fire and to travel in a helix pattern. There are 3 types of enemies in the game. The game has been included with Fedora for a very long time. The original author did create a newer version, but it dropped support for SDL and went solely with the latest Allegro. Additionally, it required a lot of additional code, like Lua, to compile, even though it didn't use it. In 2019, I took over maintenance of the older code and started doing updates. I implemented an SDL2 version and added a 2-player mode. I also added some simple Gamerzilla trophy support. I struggled to decide what to do with the game's look. I could have simply replaced the graphics, but I didn't have an idea as to what I wanted to do with it. I was watching a history of arcades on YouTube. In it, they discussed Q-em-ups. Being mostly a Japanese genre, I had little knowledge of the games. It made me wonder if Shippy 1984 could work with a cute makeover. I created a mock-up. I started with a ship I liked from Open Game Art. I picked a palette and converted and shrunk the image. For the other player, I found a set of ships After converting to the same palette, it needed a lot of tweaking to make the ship in the same style. The original ship that I had picked had lighting coming from one side, so I needed to do the same with the new ship. I found two portraits to use for the pilots. One of the women had blonde hair, but it didn't look good with the palette that I had chosen, so I converted her to a brunette. Originally, they both had the same color clothes, which could work as a uniform, but I decided to make them match the color of their ships. That left the enemy units. And not finding anything I liked, I tried drawing one of my own, but it wasn't very cute. One suggestion I was given was to make larger eyes, and so I tried that out, and it did make it better. But there were still two other enemies to make. Modanung from the freegamedev.net posted two animations. One was a side view of a bunny head with flapping ears. I took a forward-facing rabbit head from Open Game Art and animated it. The first version looked a little too dog-like when the ears were down, so some tweaks were made, including adding whiskers. Up to this point, everything is simply a mock-up. Shippy 1984 used 16 by 16 pixel images for enemies and player ships. All of the images I made were 32 by 32 pixels, so they are not simply drop-in replacements. I made a mode where Shippy 1984 would load a double-sized sprite sheet and multiply all X and Y widths and heights by 2. Shippy 1984 didn't support animations, so I hacked the drawing routine to switch to different frames as needed. I eventually created a duck as the third enemy. I'm still not really happy with it, but it works for now. The hard work would be adding in the banter cutscenes. I designed them to replace the ready text at the start of a wave. They would be added as objects at the start of the level and displayed after a certain amount of time. I didn't try to increase the time, so right now it is probably too fast to be read by many people. The cutscenes were initially hard-coded, but were moved to a data file. Deaths then got their own cutscenes as well. Everything is done, right? Not really. Cute-em-ups are shoot-em-ups with the cute look. Shoot-em-ups are vertical and or horizontal scrollers. As part of this project, I envisioned one of the characters getting annoyed at being stuck defending, like Space Invaders. And so she would go over and rush off to attack the enemy directly. At that point, it would switch to a vertical scroller. Perhaps even have the character complain about the maneuvering space, at which point it would expand from the more narrow 4:3 aspect ratio to 16:9. This sort of change would be a lot of work. Let me know in the comments if you want to see a cute-em-up version of Shippy 1984. If you want to support my work, some of my open source games are available on itch.io for purchase. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Shippy 1984. It is a game like Space Invaders
Impressive.
or Galaxian.
Very cool, Dennis.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And that's all I've got.
Nice. I like the main bad guys look like ticks, and we know what kind of various diseases are now carried by ticks. So we have to worry about.
You have just heard a TikTok.
Oh,
Take that. I had a couple of comments, not on the game, which I really enjoyed seeing what you did, but the fact that that's techie because we're looking inside Linux. There's a lot more users who just use it, don't look inside. And I thought this particular round today was very heavily loaded for people that are interested in what goes on inside. That's nice once in a while, but for beginners who pick it up later online and listen, I just want to say that it's a lot easier than this to do all your regular work with available free Linux programs, and we talk about that some too. Another comment, I put out the agenda for this month, but I hope I won't for next month. I thank Jerry for taking over the moderating, and I'm hoping somebody will be taking over the agenda work. I'll be helpful on the side where I can. And until then, I'll put out the one for tonight, the accurate, actual version of what did happen. And you can click on it and enjoy. But if you gave a talk or if you see some error in it or some way to improve it, try to get it to me by sometime tomorrow and maybe tomorrow night or a little later. I'll add any of those improvements, and that will be this month's final agenda. Thanks.
Wow.
Okay, I'm back. Well, it's after 5, so we'll get back. We'll probably see some of you at the Science on State Street. And that's just up the pretty close to my house.
Good.
Good.
Okay. See you all next month.
bye-bye.
Hey.
Bye.